The sun hung low over the sprawling Apache ranch, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Jackson Blackhawk, a broad-shouldered rancher with the kind of pride only years of hard work could build, stood at the edge of his veranda, surveying his domain. He had always known exactly what he wanted in life, and especially in a wife. Slim, delicate, graceful. Someone who would glide through his home like a whisper, never making a sound too loud, never asserting herself too boldly. So when the matchmaker arrived with a bride-to-be, Jackson's heart carried a flicker of excitement. But the moment he saw her, that excitement nearly died. She was not what he expected. Her name was Clara, and she stood before him with curves that could rival the rolling hills of his ranch. Her hips were generous, her arms soft but strong, and she carried herself with an unmistakable confidence. She smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling with mischief, and extended a hand to him. "Jackson, I'm happy to meet you." Jackson's jaw tightened. Yes. "It's a pleasure," he managed to say, though every fiber of his being resisted the truth. This was not the dainty wife he had envisioned. She was bold. She was real. And he had no idea how to reconcile the fantasy in his head with the woman in front of him. The wedding passed in a blur of traditional rites, blessings, and polite smiles. By the time they reached his bedroom that night, the tension in Jackson's chest was palpable. Clara, unbothered by his unease, surveyed the rustic room with curiosity. "So, this is where we'll sleep?" she asked, her voice soft but teasing. Jackson nodded stiffly. "Yes, the bed is sturdy," he said, more as a reassurance to himself than to her. At first, everything seemed calm. Clara climbed onto the bed with a practiced grace, settling herself onto the quilt. Jackson followed, carefully easing onto the edge. His mind raced with anticipation, dread, and a strange flutter of something he hadn't felt in years. Then it happened. The bed groaned ominously, a deep, threatening creak that made Jackson freeze. Before he could react, the frame snapped with a loud crack, sending both of them tumbling onto the floor in a heap of sheets, limbs, and startled laughter. Jackson lay there, stunned, staring at the broken wooden frame. The bed," he stammered. It broke." Clara sat up, brushing herself off, and laughed a rich, melodic sound that filled the room. "Oh, Jackson, it's just a bed." "It's not the end of the world." Her laughter was contagious, and despite himself, Jackson found a smile tugging at his lips. He had been so obsessed with appearances, so convinced that a wife must fit a perfect image, that he hadn't considered what truly mattered. Clara's strength, her confidence, her ability to take life and him in stride, was something he hadn't anticipated. "Seems like I underestimated you," he admitted, shaking his head, still trying to catch his breath from both the fall and the laughter. Clara winked. "And you'll learn to appreciate me yet, Jackson. Trust me." The moment was awkward, yes, but it was also a beginning, a small crack in the walls of Jackson's rigid expectations. For the first time, he realized that perhaps what he had been searching for wasn't a perfect body, but a perfect companion. Someone who could challenge him, laugh with him, and perhaps most importantly, teach him to let go of his old, stubborn notions of what love should look like. As they sat together amid the tangle of broken wood and rumpled sheets, Jackson felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected bride was exactly what he needed. The next morning, the sun rose over the ranch like a golden promise, spilling light across the fields and corrals. Jackson Blackhawk awoke with a stiff back, still grimacing at the memory of the bed collapsing under Clara the night before. He had spent the early hours in quiet contemplation, debating whether to repair the bed or more realistically replace it entirely. Clara, on the other hand, seemed unbothered by the ordeal. She moved around the cabin with ease, humming a tune as she unpacked her belongings. her laughter spilling into the room whenever Jackson peeked over the bedframe's remains. "You know," she said, brushing a curl from her face, "this could be a blessing in disguise. Who needs a bed when we've got all this space to explore?" She gave him a playful glance that made his pulse quicken. Jackson coughed awkwardly, pretending to adjust a cushion. Yes, explore. Of course. His mind was already racing with images that made him wish he had paid more attention in the matchmaker's briefing. Clara was more than just curvy. She was fiery, confident, an entirely unpredictable. By mid-morning, Jackson decided he had to face her directly. He stepped into the small kitchen, clearing his throat. "Clara, how about last night?" "The bed." Clara grinned, leaning casually against the counter. "Yes, I didn't expect. You know, you're stronger than I imagined," he said, his face heating with embarrassment. She laughed, a sound that seemed to echo through the cabin and beyond. "Stronger? Oh, Jackson, strength is a good thing. You'll see it comes in handy around here." She leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I can cook, clean, and yes, break a few things along the way. But I promise I'm also fun." Jackson swallowed hard, trying to mask the way her words made his heart race. He realized he had been wrong all along. It wasn't her curves that mattered. It was the fire behind them. The confidence, the laughter, the life she carried with her like sunlight in her hands. By afternoon, they were walking through the ranch together. Clara helped him mend a fence, her laughter filling the open spaces as she lifted heavy posts with ease. Jackson found himself staring not at her figure, but at her skill, her grace and motion, the way her hair caught the sunlight. "You make this look easy," he admitted, slightly out of breath from both the work and the way her energy affected him. She winked. "That's because it's fun. And maybe because I like keeping you on your toes." For the first time, Jackson realized the truth. He didn't need a fragile, delicate wife to admire. He needed someone alive, someone who challenged him, someone who could make him laugh even when life or a broken bed tested his patience. That evening, as they returned to the cabin, Jackson inspected the ruined bed frame again. Clara noticed him frowning. "It's just wood," she said softly, taking his hand in hers. "We can fix it. Or we can sleep under the stars. Either way, I'm not fragile, and I'm not leaving." Jackson looked into her eyes and smiled, a real, genuine smile. The stubborn rancher in him knew that his life, his expectations, and his heart were all about to change. For the first time in years, Jackson didn't care about appearances, ideals, or who the world expected him to be with. All that mattered was the woman beside him, laughter in her eyes, strength in her arms, and a spark in her heart that was utterly, wonderfully impossible. The following days passed in a whirl of ranch work, laughter, and unexpected discoveries. Jackson found himself watching Clara with a mixture of awe and amusement. She could handle a stubborn horse as easily as she could lift a sack of feed, her curves moving with a fluid strength that left him breathless. One afternoon, Jackson decided to teach her how to rope cattle. "Now watch closely," he said, demonstrating with precision. He swung the lasso around, catching a young calf with ease. Clara clapped, clearly impressed. "Not bad," she said, smirking. "But you're about to see how it's really done." Before he could react, she grabbed a rope and spun it around like she had done it her whole life. The lasso arced perfectly, landing over the calf's head. Jackson's jaw dropped. "By the stars, you actually did it." Clara laughed, a sound that sent warmth through him. "I told you, Jackson. I may be curvy, but I'm not helpless. And I certainly don't mind showing off a little." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mesas, they returned to the cabin, tired but exhilarated. Jackson found himself lingering near the doorway, watching her move about the room with effortless grace. Her confidence, her laughter, and the way she owned every space she entered made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Dinner's almost ready," Clara said, noticing him staring. She raised an eyebrow, teasing. "You know, you're not supposed to just stand there staring at me all day, rancher." Jackson chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. I just... You make everything look easy, natural. I didn't expect that." Clara stepped closer, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "You mean you didn't expect me?" she whispered, her voice soft but teasing. Curves, confidence, and all. His pulse quickened. He realized that she wasn't just beautiful in a traditional sense. She was intoxicating, powerful, alive, and the thought made him both nervous and excited. Later, as they attempted to fix the broken bed, Clara laughed again when a plank snapped under her weight. "Oops. Maybe we need a bigger one, or maybe we just need to accept the floor is just as fun." Jackson laughed, shaking his head. "I think the floor is fine. For now." She leaned against him, their bodies close, and he felt the warmth of her curves pressing into him. A strange, thrilling heat spread through him, and for the first time, he allowed himself to consider that maybe, just maybe, he was falling for her. All of her laughter, her strength, her fiery personality, and yes, her curves too. "Jackson," Clara murmured, tilting her head up to look at him, "do you think you can handle me?" He grinned, brushing a hand across her cheek. "I think I'm starting to like what I can't handle," she laughed, a clear, musical sound that echoed through the cabin and his heart alike. And as they sat together amid the remnants of the broken bed, Jackson realized that life on the ranch and love itself was far more thrilling, chaotic, and wonderful than he had ever imagined. For the first time, he didn't want a delicate, fragile wife. He wanted Clara, all of her strength, laughter, curves, and fire. And slowly, irresistibly, he was learning that she wanted him just as much, strong, stubborn, and completely smitten. The days on the ranch grew warmer, the sun lingering longer over the mesas, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson. Jackson found himself thinking about Clara more often than he cared to admit. He caught himself smiling when she laughed, even when she was scolding the cattle for wandering where they shouldn't. One evening, after a long day of tending the horses and mending fences, Clara suggested a walk along the ridge overlooking the valley. Jackson agreed, though he secretly hoped it was an excuse for her to be close. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and sun-warmed earth. Clara walked beside him, her hand brushing his occasionally, each touch sending sparks through him he didn't know how to handle. "You've changed a lot since we first met, Jackson," she said, her voice soft, almost reflective. "You were so stubborn. So certain you knew exactly what you wanted." Jackson chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I still know what I want. I didn't know it came in curves and with a laugh that could shatter walls." Clara laughed, leaning against him as they paused to watch a herd of deer in the distance. "And you didn't think a woman like me could fit into your life." He turned to look at her, and for a moment, the world fell away. The fire in her eyes, the way her lips curved into a smile, the gentle strength in her posture, it all made his heart race. "I didn't," he admitted. "But now I can't imagine life without you." Her laughter softened into something warmer, more intimate, and she reached up to rest a hand on his chest. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere, Jackson. I can break beds, lift horses, and argue with stubborn ranchers, but I stick around." He swallowed hard, the words resonating in him. The old Jackson, the one who had dreamed of a delicate, fragile wife, would have panicked. But this Jackson, this man standing on the ridge with Clara, felt alive, exhilarated, and surprisingly, completely at ease. Back at the cabin, they attempted the bed repair again, this time laughing through every misaligned plank and snapped nail. Clara perched on the new frame with a triumphant grin. "See? Nothing can stop me," she said, bouncing lightly. Jackson shook his head, smiling, and sat beside her. He reached for her hand, and she let him hold it, her fingers curling around his. "I think we make quite the team," he said, his voice low, intimate. Clara leaned closer, her face just inches from his. "We do," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. "And just so you know, I like that you finally stopped trying to control everything." Jackson chuckled softly. "I guess I'm learning that some things are better when you let go." Her laughter, the warmth of her body pressed against his, and the shared chaos of their little cabin, the broken bed, the repairs. The teasing made Jackson realize that life with Clara was nothing like he had imagined. It was better, fiercer, more alive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades, Jackson pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her waist. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, and in that quiet, imperfect moment, they both knew one thing. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. And Jackson, for the first time in his life, was certain of one more thing: curves, laughter, fire, and all. Clara Blackhawk had completely. The nights on the ranch had a rhythm all their own: quiet wind through the trees, distant calls of coyotes, and the gentle hum of life settling into the dark. Jackson found that he was thinking about Clara even when the world around him seemed still. She had a way of taking over his thoughts, lingering there with a mischievous spark that made his chest tighten in the best possible way. That evening, after a long day of repairing fences and hauling hay, Clara suggested they sit on the porch with a bottle of homemade apple cider. Jackson agreed, though he noticed the gleam in her eyes, a hint that mischief was afoot. "Relax, Jackson," she teased, handing him a mug. "You need to loosen up. All work and no play makes the rancher a dull man." He sipped cautiously, his eyes on her as she leaned back in the rocking chair, the curves of her body accentuated in the fading light. "I'm not dull," he said, trying to sound confident, though his heart betrayed him with every glance she threw his way. "Oh, I don't mean dull in general," she said, smirking. "I mean dull with me. I'm full of surprises, you know." Jackson arched an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Clara leaned closer, her hand brushing against his as she reached for her mug. The touch sent an electric jolt up his arm, and he swallowed hard. "It's true. Some surprises can be exciting." Jackson's pulse quickened. He leaned back slightly, pretending to admire the horizon, though all his attention was on her. "Exciting, huh? I think I might be ready for one of these surprises," he said carefully, a teasing lilt in his voice. Clara's laugh was soft, intimate, and utterly contagious. "Good," she whispered. She tilted her head toward him, close enough that he could feel her warmth, her presence like a magnet. "Because I have plenty more where that came from." For a moment, the ranch, the sun, the world, all of it disappeared. Jackson realized he was staring at her lips, thinking about the curve of her smile and the fire in her eyes. Clara's hand lingered on his arm, fingers tracing absent patterns, teasing him as much as she pleased. He swallowed hard, the tension between them electric. "Clara, She placed a finger gently against his lips, cutting him off. She said softly. "No words, just feel." Jackson exhaled slowly, closing the gap between them. He leaned in, and Clara tilted her head, their breaths mingling. The world was quiet except for the soft creak of the rocking chairs and the pounding of their hearts. They didn't rush. Every touch, every brush of skin against skin was deliberate, a playful exploration, a silent conversation between them. Jackson realized that this wasn't just desire. It was connection, laughter, trust, and something stronger than anything he had expected. When they finally pulled back slightly, both were flushed and smiling, a shared laughter escaping them. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder again, sighing happily. See? I told you surprises can be fun. Jackson chuckled, brushing a hand through her hair. You're right, I wasn't ready for you. But I'm glad you're here. All of you. Clara lifted her head to look at him, her eyes sparkling. Good, because I'm staying, Jackson. Bed breaking or not, I'm not going anywhere. Jackson grinned, pulling her closer. Then I guess I'd better get used to surprises. And curves. And all the chaos you bring. She laughed, resting against him, and in that moment, Jackson knew that life on the ranch and with Clara would never be the same. And he wouldn't have it any other way. The ranch had settled into a comfortable rhythm, but Jackson couldn't deny that the days felt different now. Every glance from Clara sent a flutter through his chest. Every laugh, every mischievous smirk, made him more aware of just how alive she made him feel. One morning, he found her outside near the horses, adjusting a saddle with surprising ease. The sun highlighted the curves he had once considered a flaw, making her look strong, radiant, and untouchably confident. You're staring again, Clara teased, raising an eyebrow as she wiped her hands on a rag. Jackson's face heated. I'm appreciating your, skills, he said, fumbling with words. Clara laughed, a warm, teasing sound that made his heart skip. Skills, huh? I think you mean my curves, Jackson. Don't worry, I'm used to admiration. He groaned, shaking his head, but the truth was undeniable. He was captivated by everything about her, her strength, her humor, and the way she seemed to own every moment. That evening, after a long day of work, they retreated to the cabin. The broken bed, now partially repaired, stood as a reminder of the chaos and laughter they had already shared. Clara flopped onto it with a grin. Feels nice to relax, she said, stretching. Although, this bed still hates me a little, Jackson chuckled, joining her on the floor beside it. Maybe we just need to be careful. Or stronger. He gave her a playful nudge and she rolled her eyes. Smiling Dot as the night grew darker, the warmth between them grew more tangible. Clara leaned into him, her hand brushing his, their fingers intertwining naturally. Jackson, she whispered, you don't have to hold back around me. He met her gaze, feeling the intensity of the moment. I'm not holding back, he murmured, the teasing lilt in his voice hiding the truth. He was completely captivated by her. Their playful, flirting slowly melted into something more intimate. Every touch, every brush of skin against skin was electric. Clara laughed softly when he accidentally brushed against her in the wrong spot, teasing him mercilessly. Jackson, though flustered, couldn't stop smiling. He was enjoying every moment, every spark of connection. You're dangerous, he admitted breathlessly, a hand resting on her shoulder. Clara grinned, leaning closer. Only if you let me be, she whispered, her lips brushing against his cheek, sending a shiver down his spine. Jackson felt a warmth spread through him, stronger than the sun overhead. He realized that his life, his expectations, his old ideals had been shattered, just like the bed they had broken together. But this was better, fiercer, more real. As they sat together in the quiet cabin, laughter and whispered confessions mingling in the shadows, Jackson understood something vital. Clara wasn't just a surprise, a challenge, or even a temptation. She was the woman he had been waiting for all along, the partner who could match his strength, challenge his stubbornness, and make his heart race in ways he hadn't imagined possible. Stay with me, he said softly, his forehead resting against hers. Clara smiled, brushing her hand across his chest. Always, Jackson. Broken beds and all. And in that moment, amidst the chaos, the laughter, and the undeniable heat between them, Jackson knew their bond was unshakable. Life on the ranch and their love would never be the same, and he wouldn't want it. The mornings on the ranch had taken on a new rhythm. Jackson woke earlier than ever, not just to tend the livestock, but because he secretly looked forward to seeing Clara moving through the kitchen, humming a tune as sunlight caught the highlights in her hair. Her laughter seemed to hang in the air like a melody, and every glance her way made him smile before he even realized it. One particular morning, Clara decided to help him gather the horses near the far corral. She approached him with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Race you to the fence," she challenged, already jogging ahead, her ponytail bouncing. Jackson couldn't resist. "You're on," he replied, breaking into a run, trying to catch her, but secretly enjoying every curve that seemed to glide past him. Effortlessly by the time they reached the fence. Both were laughing, breathless, and flushed from exertion. Clara leaned against the rail, hands on her knees, and grinned. "See? Who said curves aren't fast?" Jackson shook his head, chuckling. "You're impossible. I think I might be falling for you faster than I can admit." Her laugh was soft and teasing. "Good, because I like when you fall, especially if you fall for me." The playful teasing had become a daily ritual, a way for them to explore the boundaries of their attraction without ever rushing it. Yet Jackson couldn't deny the magnetic pull between them. One evening, after a long day repairing the ranch's broken fence line, Clara flopped onto the porch swing with a sigh. Jackson sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. "You're still laughing at my expense?" he asked with a grin. "Always," she admitted, nudging him with her elbow. "But only because you're worth it." They shared a quiet moment, rocking gently, the sunset painting the horizon with fiery oranges and pinks. Jackson felt the urge to lean closer, to close the small distance between them. He did, tentatively brushing a strand of hair from her face. Clara didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her head, letting him see the warmth in her eyes, the spark that had drawn him in from the very beginning. "You know," she murmured softly, "I like it when you're not afraid to show me who you are." Jackson's chest tightened. "Then you'll like what I'm about to show you next," he said, his hand brushing along hers, fingers intertwining. The porch swing creaked under their combined weight, but neither seemed to notice or care. Clara leaned against him, laughter mixing with whispered words as the sky deepened into twilight. Their playful flirting had become something electric and tender all at once. Jackson realized that Clara didn't just break beds, she broke expectations, shattered old ideals, and yet somehow made him feel stronger, braver, and more alive than he had ever been. As the first stars appeared overhead, Jackson whispered, "Curves, laughter, fire. I wouldn't trade any of it for anything. Not even for the perfect wife I thought I wanted." Clara pressed closer, resting her head against his chest. "Good," she whispered back, "because I'm not perfect. And I'm all yours." Jackson wrapped his arm around her, holding her close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. The ranch, the broken bed, the teasing, and the laughter, all of it had led to this. And in that quiet moment, under the stars with Clara in his arms, Jackson knew one truth. He had found the love he never expected, the kind of love that broke barriers, defied expectations, and left a permanent mark on his heart. The days on the ranch had become a blend of work, laughter, and stolen moments that neither Jackson nor Clara could resist. Every chore, every task, seemed to carry a new thrill simply because they were doing it together. Even mundane things like feeding the horses or mending fences turned into games of teasing, laughter, and light-hearted competition. One warm afternoon, Jackson found Clara perched on the porch railing, swinging her legs with a carefree grin. "Careful there," he warned. "You might fall off," Clara laughed, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "And miss out on the view?" "Never." She leaned toward him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her. "Besides, you could always catch me if I do." Jackson's heart skipped. "Catch you, huh? You make it sound so easy." "Oh, it's easy," she said, tilting her head and giving him a teasing smile. You just have to try hard enough." The playful banter had become a delicious tension between them, one that made even the quietest moments feel electric. That evening, as they sat on the porch swing watching the sun sink behind the mesas, the teasing turned softer, more intimate. Clara shifted closer, her hand brushing his. "Jackson," she whispered, "do you ever think about us?" He met her gaze, the setting sun highlighting the sparkle in her eyes. "Every day," he admitted. "More than I probably should." Her laughter was a soft melody. "Good, because I think about us too." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world seemed to fall away. The ranch, the chores, the broken bed. It was just the two of them, a closeness that neither could ignore. Jackson reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers, feeling the warmth, the softness, the undeniable connection. "Clara," he murmured, "you've changed everything for me. My expectations, my life. I never thought someone like you could be exactly what I needed." Clara leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "And you're exactly what I needed too," she whispered. "Strong, stubborn, and willing to keep up with me." Jackson smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "Then I guess we're stuck with each other," he said, teasing. Clara laughed softly, lifting her head to look at him. "Stuck? I like that word," she murmured, her eyes glinting with mischief. "It feels permanent," he chuckled, leaning back to watch the stars appear overhead. "Permanent doesn't sound bad," he admitted. Not at all. As the night deepened, they stayed on the porch swing, talking, laughing, and occasionally brushing against each other in ways that made Jackson's pulse race. Every glance, every touch, every shared laugh felt like a promise, one of love, trust, and a fiery passion that neither of them could ignore. By the time they finally stepped inside the cabin, the repaired bed awaited, but Jackson barely noticed. He had realized long ago that the bed wasn't the measure of their closeness. It was the laughter, the teasing, the stolen moments, and the way they could hold each other through the quiet and the chaos that mattered. Clara leaned against him as he flicked off the lights, her warmth pressing close. "Jackson," she whispered, "I think it's only getting better." He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "I know," he murmured, "and I wouldn't trade a single moment." In that quiet, imperfect cabin, amidst broken beds and endless laughter, Jackson and Clara discovered a truth neither of them had anticipated. Love, real love, was messy, fiery, and full of surprises, and it was exactly what they had. The ranch had never felt more alive than it did with Clara by his side. Every morning, Jackson woke to the sound of her laughter drifting through the cabin, and every night her warmth was the last thing he felt before sleep claimed him. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, fueled by playful teasing, shared work, and stolen glances that spoke louder than words. One afternoon, Clara decided it was time for a little mischief. She appeared at the cabin door, hair tousled from a long ride, her clothes dusted with dirt, and a grin that promised trouble. "Jackson," she called, "think you can keep up today?" He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what are we doing?" "Race to the creek," she said, pointing toward the far end of the ranch. "First one there gets the last slice of apple pie tonight." Jackson smirked, his competitive streak ignited. "You're on." They ran through the fields, laughing as they dodged bushes, jumped over rocks, and navigated the uneven terrain. Clara's curves moved with a strength and grace that left Jackson both amazed and breathless. By the time they reached the creek, both were panting and grinning like teenagers. "You cheated," Jackson accused, though the sparkle in his eyes betrayed his admiration. Clara laughed, brushing a damp curl from her face. "Cheated? Me? Never. I just happened to be fast." As they sat on the bank, catching their breath, Clara leaned against him, her shoulder pressing warmly into his. Jackson wrapped an arm around her, feeling the curve of her body, the heat of her presence, and the undeniable thrill that came from simply being near her. "You know," he murmured, his voice low and intimate, "I never expected this, all of it. You, this, us." Clara tilted her head, her lips brushing his ear as she whispered, "And yet, here we are." "I think you like it more than you admit." Jackson swallowed hard, the teasing intimacy between them making his pulse race. Yeah, I like it," he admitted. "More than I thought possible." Their playful closeness soon turned into something more intimate. Fingers intertwined, laughter mixing with whispered words, and the gentle heat of their bodies pressed together under the shade of a large oak. Every touch, every brush of skin against skin, sent sparks through both of them. Clara giggled softly as he accidentally tickled her ribs. "You're enjoying this too much," she teased. "I can't help it," he admitted, grinning. "You make it impossible not to." As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Jackson pulled her closer. Clara rested her head against his chest, her hair spilling over his shoulder. "Jackson," she whispered, "I think we're unstoppable together." He kissed the top of her head, holding her tightly. "Unstoppable, fiery, and completely unforgettable," he murmured. "Just like you. The broken bed in the cabin, the chores, the teasing, the laughter, all of it was meaningless compared to the bond they shared. They had discovered something rare and beautiful, a love that was messy, passionate, playful, and utterly unshakable. As the stars appeared overhead, Jackson and Clara sat by the creek, wrapped in each other's arms. For the first time, Jackson knew that life's surprises, the laughter, the chaos, the curves, the fire were exactly what made love worth it. And in that quiet, magical moment, with the world fading around them, Jackson whispered softly, "Curves, fire, laughter. You're mine, Clara, always." Clara lifted her head, her eyes sparkling in the starlight. "And you're mine, Jackson." "No matter what," she said, smiling. They laughed together, hearts beating in unison, ready to face the world-broken beds, ranch life, and all side by side. Forever. The ranch was quiet that morning, bathed in the soft golden light of dawn. Jackson stood on the porch, sipping coffee, watching the wind stir the tall grasses, but his thoughts weren't on the land, they were on Clara. She had woken early, humming as she moved through the cabin, and the sight of her brought a warmth to his chest he couldn't shake. Clara appeared beside him, hands on her hips, a mischievous grin on her face. "Good morning, rancher," she said, leaning into him. "Good morning, troublemaker," he replied, smiling. "You've already caused enough chaos today?" She laughed softly. "Oh, you mean yesterday's fence fiasco? Or the bed incident?" She tapped the repaired bed behind them. "We should probably call it a success, don't you think?" Jackson shook his head, chuckling. "I'm starting to think nothing on this ranch is safe from you." "Good," she said, brushing her hand along his arm. "I like leaving a mark." Their playful banter faded into a comfortable silence as they walked through the ranch together, Clara's hand slipping naturally into his. There was a rhythm to them now, a partnership built on laughter, mutual respect, and undeniable attraction. The broken bed, the teasing, the races to the creek, they had all been small sparks that had ignited a fire far stronger than either of them had imagined. Later that evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky with vibrant hues, they returned to the cabin. Jackson glanced at the repaired bed, then at Clara, and felt a rush of affection and desire. "You know," he murmured, "I never imagined I'd end up with someone like you." Clara tilted her head, eyes glinting with playful challenge. "Someone like me, you mean? Curvy, fearless, and impossible to handle?" Jackson laughed, taking her hand. "Exactly that. And yet, I can't imagine anyone else." Her laughter softened into a warm smile. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere, Jackson." "Not for anything." He pulled her close, their bodies fitting together naturally, perfectly, as if the world had shifted to make space just for them. Every touch, every brush of lips was electric, full of passion and tenderness. They had learned each other's quirks, strengths, and weaknesses, but more importantly, they had learned how to love each other fully. Curves, fire, laughter. "Everything about you," Jackson whispered against her hair. "I love it all." Clara looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. "And I love you, Jackson." "Stubborn, strong, and completely captivated by me." They laughed together, a rich, joyous sound that filled the cabin and spilled into the night. The repaired bed creaked under their weight, a reminder of the chaos that had brought them together, but now it was part of their story, part of their love. As they held each other close, the stars twinkling overhead, Jackson realized that life on the ranch, with its unpredictable twists, laughter, and challenges, had never been sweeter. He had wanted perfection, a fragile ideal, but what he had found in Clara was far greater: passion, humor, strength, and a love that could withstand anything. Clara rested her head on his chest, smiling, and whispered, "So, you're really stuck with me now, aren't you?" Jackson kissed the top of her head, his arms wrapped around her. "Stuck? Yes, but happier than I've ever been. Forever, Clara, you and me, forever." And in the quiet warmth of their cabin, surrounded by the laughter, chaos, and love they had built together, Jackson and Clara finally knew they had found exactly what they were meant to have: a life full of passion, joy,